Hey readers, welcome to another episode of Not Reading for Content. It is the final Friday of September, meaning that we are all getting very excited for the autumnal season, the autumnal month that is October. Danny and I will be discussing autumnal reads today, specifically recommendations. She has 3 books to recommend to you. I have 3 other books to recommend to you. And hopefully, if you're interested and if these books are available, you can pick 1 or 2 up during the autumn season or any other time in the year. Danny, what are your 3 recommendations in any order?
So I have a variety of lengths for you guys today because I know not everyone wants chunky reads, not everyone wants short reads. So I have a novella, I have a duology if you guys are feeling a series, and then I have a chunky read for you guys. So I'll start with the novella. We'll start small and work our way up. So the novella that I have for you guys is Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. I can't give an autumnal spooky season recommendation without mentioning T. Kingfisher because I think that her fantasy horror is like some of my favorite. It's just very fun, very cozy as well. This book in particular follows a character named Toadling, who it's a Sleeping Beauty reimagining. And so Toadling's responsibility is to watch this tower. And there's some dark vibes. You don't really know what's going on. You get to live with her throughout this process. It's very fun and a light read if you aren't wanting something super heavy for spooky season. I also have, ooh, and I'm probably going to butcher this author's name, but it's Foul Days by is it Genoveva Dimova, which is a book surrounding the Foul Days, which are 12 days where monsters take over this city that our main character is living in. She is a witch. She's lost her powers. She's trying to get them back so she can help the people of her town be safe. It's so much fun, and it has, like, a monster guide where they tell you, like, how to survive different monster encounters that you have within the series, and it's only a duology, so if you want a series, but you don't want a series, it's, like, 5 or 6 books. It's 2 books, both of them read very, very quickly. Definitely a recommend, for spooky season. And then my chonky recommendation, I'm also probably gonna butcher this author's name because I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'm so sorry, guys. This is Night Film by Marisha Pessel, I think is how you pronounce it. And Night Film is a mystery horror where you are following an investigative journalist who is looking into the supposed suicide of the death of an infamous horror director that he has had some dealings with in the past. There is mixed media in this, so if you are going to pick up Night Film, I do like the audio, but I would recommend having a physical copy so you can get the darknet blog posts that you get to see within the book and solve the mystery. So this one's definitely the darker of all 3 of my recommendations. And I will say, I think this one, the ending of this one is probably not for everybody, but I freaking loved it. So if you're looking for spooky, if you like mysteries with just a little bit of horror sprinkled in, I think this one's perfect. What about you? What are your recommendations?
First off, I loved your recommendations, and I have quite a few thoughts that we will save until the end. And I also loved that you ended up organizing it by length. For me, I think I'm going to be organizing my 3 recommendations going from the coziest option to the creepiest, darkest option. So we kind of have different vibes going on. The first recommendation I'm going to provide is actually a middle grade graphic novel, Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Polson. This is just a very sweet, quick read. The illustrations are gorgeous. It's part of a duology. So there is a second book called Garlic and the Witch, and I fell in love with it. It's very sweet. It follows Garlic, our main character, and they're just living their best life as a vegetable among many that are helping a witch who animated them to help her in her garden. And they're just, having a normal time until smoke comes from the mountainside. And the witch says casually, "Oh, it appears that the vampire has returned." And of course, all of the vegetables are terrified as though they would be the ones that the vampire would want to munch on. And they decide that Garlic needs to be the one to face off the vampire because we all know garlic and vampires don't mix. And Garlic, being a bit of a shy bean, is quite nervous for this journey, but she's also up for the task. And It's so heartfelt. It's very sweet. The themes in this are really wonderful and cozy. There's some great LGBT rep that you wouldn't expect as well in the duology. And I can't recommend it enough to adults, but also if you have a younger reader that you want them to engage in a story that would be really comforting, then this would be a perfect, maybe spooky gift for them. More spoopy than anything else, but it's very, very sweet. So yeah, one of my favorite books when I read it. Then we're going to get a little bit more spooky, but it's still quite cozy in nature, I would say. And that is Grave Expectations by Alice Bell. This is a paranormal mystery. It very much is a cozy mystery. It follows a medium who sees ghosts. And she isn't a fake. She truly does see ghosts, but she's also a little bit of a mess. And one of the ghosts that she typically has around her is her old high school best friend who did unfortunately pass during, I think it's like the early to late noughties, meaning that she is still dressed in that attire. She still speaks as though she's, from the 2000s, which adds to the kind of fun and chaos of it all. And they end up getting this job of going to a mansion to entertain a group of guests. Someone ends up dying at that establishment. And now we have our medium, her ghost friend, and a couple others creating this Scooby gang of sorts to get down to the mystery, figure out who murdered this person. And it's just a riot. There is a lot of cursing in it, which can turn people off. I found it a bit endearing and quite funny, especially because it's set in the UK. And so I can't recommend it enough if you like some silliness in your mysteries. And then the spookiest of them all. This one is a novella, and it's also a translation. We have The Night Guest. This was translated from Icelandic. The author is Hildur Knutsdottir, and actually, interestingly enough, it's translated by an author that both Danny and I have read from before, and that is Mary Robinette Kowal. We ended up reading a sci-fi mystery by Kowal, The Spare Man. So it's just kind of interesting because it's also very much a departure because this is a horror novella. So I gave you cozy vibes in the first two elements or the first two books that I offered, but this one is very much a horror, and it follows a woman who just needs some sleep. She is exhausted. She tries to go to the doctor, and they're all saying, oh, maybe it's menopause, maybe it's this, that, or the other thing. Really not taking her symptoms seriously. And she ends up being told, oh, just exercise more, eat better. And she ends up getting basically like a Fitbit, and she forgets to take it off one night. And when she looks at it in the morning, she realizes that she had walked thousands of steps while she was supposedly sleeping. And she begins to wonder if her sister, who passed not long ago, is haunting her, is somehow taking her body, possessing her, and doing things that she's not aware of at night. And it's really interesting, quite speculative. The ending is a bit ambiguous, which not everyone is going to vibe with. There also is content warning for animal death, so be sure to check on that if that's something that you want to avoid this spooky season. But I just thought it was really well written, and I read it in one day.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's quite short chapters, and it becomes a bit dreamlike as the main character just kind of succumbs to her life unraveling, I'll say.
Yeah.
And you do wonder, is she being possessed by her sister? Is there something else going on psychologically? And I think it's really well done. I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for this Icelandic author. If she publishes more, if more of her work gets published in English, I'll be picking it up for sure.
And as far as so animal death is something, because I am interested in that title, but the animal death definitely puts me off a little bit. Is it super on page, or is it just a glancing mention?
This is an important distinction, and I'm in the same vein as you in wanting to know how explicit is it. And I will say that the actual death is not on page. We do end up coming upon, the scene of dead animals, specifically cats, which is also something that could trigger people if they're very particular regarding the animal that is killed. But it's not on page, I will say. I think that it's artfully done in the sense where it's still impactful, but I wasn't forced to see anything grotesque or overt. And I'll say the same thing, that there's also human death, but we don't see that on page either. So I think that there is this suggestion of, and if you understand the synopsis, you kind of probably know what what may be happening as far as we're following the main character. And if she's not seeing it, that means these things probably happened either while she was asleep or not around, is what I'll say. And so we don't get to see these things on page, which can at least be a comfort because there's that wall of separation a bit.
That's good to know. The other two were already on my TBR. I have Garlic and the Vampire, I just think sounds so cute. And I think it was Lotta from Lotta's Nook that originally introduced me to that book. But then you read it and I was like, I have to get my hands on it. But I do want to read it physically because it has some really great illustrations. But yeah, that's on my list. And then Grave Expectations, ever since you really enjoyed it last year. It's been up there on my list. Was it last year or was it the beginning of this year? It was last year. Yeah.
It was last year around this time, actually, maybe a little bit further into the fall. I think I actually, you know what? I think I read all three of these books. Maybe not Garlic and the Vampire. I think I read that one during Amazing Readathon a couple of years ago. So, and that was back when it was in August. But both the Night Guest and Grave Expectations, I read both of those last fall, winter. So definitely in cooler months when I really was able to thoroughly enjoy them. And I've since read the second book to Grave Expectations, Displeasure Island, also had just a riot. It was so fun, really enjoyed it. Now, your recommendations, all three of them are on my want to read list. Night Film is something I've wanted to read ever since you picked up that title, and I know that I'm going to really enjoy it, but I keep waiting for the right time to simply delve into the mixed media because I really want to thoroughly enjoy that. Foul Days also is a newer book added to, you just read this last year, I want to say, as well.
Yep, it was last year on spooky season. And I read it and its sequel, Monstrous Nights, in the same year because I was just obsessed. I just freaking love the story. I think it's great.
Interesting. And you know what's absolutely interesting is we do have a few genre blends on our list, at least two. I'm not sure if Thornhedge counts as a genre blend. I know it's like is it a fairy tale reimagining? That isn't necessarily horror though, right? It's a bit more.
I wouldn't say that it's horror. They do call it fantasy horror when they, as in Goodreads. And I think T. Kingfisher writes a lot of fairy tale retellings with a horror twist. And so I don't know if there's enough horror in here for me to call it a fantasy horror. I think that it's just fantasy with a little drop in of horror.
Right. And when we get to fairy tale retellings, I mean, the original stories often are horrific.
Right.
So there is that weird fine line, especially like Grimm's fairy tales. They are quite dark, but usually we fit fairy tale retellings in fantasy. And so I think it does kind of toe the line in between there. But yeah, you have other horror not horror reimaginings, but horror blends, because you gave us the horror fantasy. You also gave us that horror mystery and Night Film, which of course I thoroughly enjoy seeing, because you don't see horror blending too often with those two genres. At least horror does often blend with sci-fi, or it kind of stands on its own, maybe a historical horror, which you never really hear, do you? You never hear people say horror, historical horror, like we would say historical fantasy or historical mystery. That's weird, and I just realized that.
I wonder if it does happen and people just don't call it out, that it's not a subgenre that people highlight, because I don't know. Because it's not like most of the horror that I've read I would consider modern.
Right. Yeah. I don't, maybe it doesn't happen enough, or if it does, timeline, as far as a date, time, and place, isn't something that feels that impactful. Maybe fear is timeless. So people don't really care if it's happening in the future, in the past, or right now.
Yeah, I could see that. That's interesting. I'll have to think about all the books that I've read and see if I feel like they are historical or were historical, I guess, at the time of publishing them. But
Right. Food for thought. But on that note, friends, if you want to provide us your own recommendations, what are some spooky titles that you think more people should be aware of, more people should be picking up in October or any other time in the year? Let us know either by writing in, sending us an email, or if you are here on YouTube, you can feel free to leave us a comment as well. But what are you currently reading, Danny?
I am 25% of the way into The Society of Unknowable Objects by Gareth Brown, who is the author of The Book of Doors, which is my second favorite book of last year. So I'm very excited to get into this fantasy mystery. We know I enjoy a good fantasy mystery genre blend. I think they're very fun. And because it's an author that I've loved in the past, I'm having a good time with it. So I'm excited to get back to it. What about you? What's you're currently reading?
I actually just finished a book today by Cyril Hare, Tragedy at Law. It was fine. I think the mystery itself was lackluster, but I really enjoyed the lessons that I gained about British law, especially in the time of war, because it's set during World War II. And really, what I'm doing now is trying to figure out what I'm picking up next. As you know, Danny, there's one title that I've been telling you I'm going to be reading, not just this month, but last month, the month before. It has been hanging over my head, and that is Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. And I know so many other people, especially a certain number of listeners to this podcast, are huge champions of this book, especially you as well. And so I'm very much looking forward to it. So I feel like I'm going to need you all to hold me accountable, but the plan is to start it tonight. So hopefully at some point I can keep you guys updated and let you know that I've read it, that I finished it, and hopefully I loved it.
I will be looking for your voice messages telling me what you think of the first couple of chapters. I'll be your accountability buddy. So let me know. And then as for what you guys maybe should be reading, if you so choose, we are starting up our monthly book club next month in October, and we will be reading The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. So next Friday, we will be hyping this book up. We're going to be talking about the synopsis. We're going to be going through all of the things, all of the excitement to try and get ourselves ready for spooky season. So if you guys would like to join us for spooky season, please pick that book up. But we have to get to reading. So we hope that you guys have a good time with whatever book you pick up next. And hopefully we'll see you next Friday. Happy reading.